Okay, we're live. We're ready when you are.
Hey, guys, good to be here.
All of a sudden, I catch something black in my peripheral.
What happened next?
And then it stands directly up. And by that, I mean on two legs.
And he said that once he did that, he could not see him anymore.
That's incredible.
What I saw looked like a cross between an animal and a human.
It really just kind of shakes it to the core.
Solid black, and it looks to be like it's on.
They saw something that didn't look like human.
That sounds terrifying.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to Beyond the Unknown. I'm your host, Andre. I'm joined by my brother and co-host, Daniel. What's up, Daniel?
What up, dude?
And this is the long-awaited episode 12, where we recap the entirety of season 2. Now, we wanted to do this a number of weeks ago, but because of other circumstances and things going in our lives and then the holidays, we decided to kind of put this off. But now is the time we're going to do it. And we're going to kind of briefly go over all the different stories we heard in season 2, because we had a number of really good stories, really interesting stories, especially having to do with Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, you know, one of the stories in particular, you know, Mike Bler, you know, that was one of the ones that really changed my whole perspective on the idea that Bigfoot really exists, which I really do believe that Bigfoot is definitely out there. Sasquatch lives out in the dark, hard to reach places of the earth. But guys, make sure before you do that, before we do anything else, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure you follow us and leave a positive comment. That helps with the algorithm, helps get this podcast more circulated. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by heading over to nicotina.net. That's the homepage for all three of my channels, including Beyond the Unknown. The description, or in the description below, you'll find the link that will take you to the membership section of Beyond the Unknown, and you can help support the channel by becoming a member, and then that'll give you access to our community online. And as we start to ramp things up for season 3, that's right, season 3 is coming. We're going to be putting more and more content on there for the community members. So definitely check that out over at nicotina.net, or use the link in the description below to become a member and help support the channel. And like I said, we are on Spotify as well. We're also on Spreaker, we're on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Beyond the Unknown, and follow us on wherever you find your podcasts. It definitely does help support the channel in that way as well. So with that being said, Daniel, we had some amazing stories that we heard over the season. Of course, we ended with a bang with the legendary Ron Morehead that Daniel got a chance to talk to. I couldn't be there because I had my son's first soccer game, and it was out of town. So unfortunately, I could not be there, but Daniel spearheaded that one, and that was a really good conversation as well that you had with Ron Morehead. You want to talk to us about that conversation?
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool, you know, talking to someone that has so much history and knowledge about Bigfoot, you know, Sasquatch. It was interesting talking to him because he had a lot of different point of views that I hadn't really talked to anyone that had those point of views before, you know. Right. So he's a very unique individual, someone that really brings a lot to the conversation. And you know, it was good to be able to like relate to some of the stuff that he was talking about, bring up other topics and articles that I have run into and come across, and was able to speak to it with him. It was a really good conversation. It was fun. It was great talking with him. He's super cool, really laid back, you know. Yeah. Very easy to conversate with, and he can go, man. When that guy, when Ron starts talking, he can really talk, and he can let out a lot of stuff. And that's the big thing is let him talk, because he is a living legend. So the more he talks, the better. You know, let this stuff be out in the internet. So it's awesome. It was awesome.
Well, yeah, it's like you were saying, he's a living legend, and you know, if we were to have someone like him on the show, I mean, someone like him, not just him, you let them talk, and you give them all the freedom to kind of just go, because they have so much experience and knowledge on the topic. It's really incredible. And he talked a lot about the Sierra sounds. He sort of went into the origin of how that came together.
Yeah.
He also talked about, about his belief that this could be a supernatural type creature that can travel between dimensions. He sort of mentioned that as well.
Yeah, he did. He spoke, a lot about the woo, if you want to call that, the woo.
Yeah.
Which is all good. Everyone has their own, way of looking at, Sasquatch and how to interpret what they see. So it's really interesting. The Sierra Sounds section of that interview was really cool because he did talk a lot about how that started, why he was up there. I would love to talk to him again and just delve into that. I know that he has like a special coming out soon about the Sierra Sounds. He's been posting about it. But yeah, just talking with him and getting that perspective was really interesting, and he goes into other topics besides just UFOs. He talks just about Bigfoot. He talks about, alien species being here on Earth, was here a long time ago. So it goes into a lot of different topics, and it was just really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, no, we're definitely gonna try to get him back on the show for season 3 because I want to talk to this guy. I was jealous listening to it. I was like, oh god, I wanted to ask him so many questions. But no, I thought Daniel did a fabulous job, and it's a really good episode. Check it out. It's episode 11 of season 2.
Yeah.
So if you go over to wherever you find podcasts or even on YouTube, it's episode 11. Ron Morehead, legendary Bigfoot researcher, and it's about an hour and 15 minutes, so it's not too much time, but definitely check that out because, dude, it was really cool. I really dug it.
It's mind blowing. It's great if you just want to kick back and listen to it before you go to bed. Put it on, man. It's an awesome conversation. We get into a lot of different topics. It was a lot of fun.
He talked about the Anunnaki and everything.
He goes into the Anunnaki and all that, realm of conversation. We talk about the age of the universe. There's a lot of stuff in that conversation that we talked about, not just about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, but just a whole spectrum of things. So really entertaining, really a lot of fun. It was a pleasure talking with Ron Morehead. And
another guest that we had on was Matt Napp, host of Bigfoot Crossroads. That was actually our first episode of the season. It was really fun to talk to him because I've listened to him so many times on his podcast and be able to have a conversation with him. Man, he was super cool. And one of the things that he had said to Robert and Steven of Bigfoot Club podcast, who we had on right after him, was he told them, he's like, you know what? He's like, this is one of the first times in a long time that I've been on a podcast where I actually had fun. Because we got him to laugh, and we had a really good time. But his story was really, really interesting because he went out to that spot that he goes to, and out in the woods, and I believe he was in Oklahoma. I want to say,
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, and they were in the parking lot at night, looking into the woods, and with the night vision. Not even goggles, night vision. What do you call it? It's like a scope on top of your gun. And
he was holding it. Yeah,
he was holding it, and he saw a Sasquatch staring back at them through the trees. And I remember they had gotten the scoop to go there because oftentimes in the middle of the night, the trash cans would be ripped apart, and there'd be, someone would be rummaging through there. And so it was either a bear or something like Bigfoot. And so they went there, and he said he literally saw the face of a Sasquatch staring back at him through the trees.
Yeah.
That I thought was incredible. Just knowing that it's out there and it was looking at him. I thought that was remarkable. I couldn't imagine what that'd be like to be staring back at something that, with all intents and purposes, shouldn't even exist.
Right. Yeah, no, he was cool because he's super down to earth guy.
Yeah.
And he's on episode 147 right now on his podcast. So he's talked to a lot of people. And he's coming out with interviews at least once a week right now. So he is still pumping away. He's very active. He's a former research guy in the field. He's done a lot of that. I think now he's spending more time, in the studio and doing interviews. So he has a lot of knowledge. He's spoken to a lot of people. He's listened to a ton of encounters, and I think he's the one that really kind of like spurred our desire to get into this topic more. It was because of Bigfoot Crossroads, so it was a really nice way to start the season for us, and a really good interview with him. And we go through a lot of different topics, and it was all focused around Bigfoot and Sasquatch, but he's also a realist where he can spot something that doesn't make sense, and that's really really hard to see sometimes, when you listen to someone and you're just like, well, that doesn't make any sense, but you never know. You never know. But Matt Napp will call it out, and it was awesome, man. I mean, that's what got us into, another interview that we had.
Yeah, we talked to Robert and Steven of Bigfoot Club podcast. They reached out to us as soon as they saw the episode with Matt Napp, and talking with those guys. I mean, again, super cool guys. Really into their research, and they had a story about an older couple that was driving and had an encounter. Daniel, did you want to tell that story?
If my memory serves me correct, they were driving down the road. It was a daytime, but it was a forest environment that they were driving through, and they saw someone in the creek, and they slowed down and they called like, hey, and it was actually a Bigfoot that turned around, and the lady who was in the passenger seat screamed, and so did the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And then they drove off. That one is a pretty intense story. You did a fantastic short on that section of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys get a chance, just go through some of those shorts, because they were amazing that we did in this season 2. But that one was a really good one. It got a shit ton of hits. It's such a great story. It really kind of like, it just brings it home, because the innocence of two elderly people in a car coming across something like this. It's kind of scary, I mean, it's like, oh shit, what is this?
Well, the other thing too that I liked about the story was that it sort of humanizes Bigfoot. It screamed back at them, and not only did it scream, not like it didn't scream like where it was trying to scare them. It screamed as if it got scared as well, like ah. Yeah. And so that was the part I liked the most, is that they described how it looks scared. Which tells you that like it has a range of emotions that it can, I don't want to say tap into, but that it's able to express. And so that tells me that there's a higher level of intelligence when it comes to these creatures and what they're able to process emotionally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
They also talked about how they went to the Indian reservation, and then there was camera footage behind the casino that was there, or the hotel, that had a Bigfoot that was eating from the grease trap. And
that's right. Yeah.
And who was it? I forgot who actually. There's people who's actually seen it before, who's seen the actual footage. They weren't able to get to it because they didn't. The tribe didn't want to share that footage with them.
Yeah.
But that was interesting too, because that's a story I've heard before. I forgot. I might have been Ron Morehead. I think he's the one who's seen that video. And
he might have. We didn't get into that one, but
I forgot. There was another researcher, or there's another person who's seen that video, and I've seen video of them talking about it. And they were saying how it was standing next to a telephone pole, and or like a light post, and that kind of gives you an idea of how tall it was, and it was huge. So that was really, really interesting to hear that story. Because I mean, if anyone's going to have experiences, in encountering this thing, it's going to be, obviously the Native Americans, and plus through their culture as well. There's a lot of stories that talk about a creature like Sasquatch that lives out in the wilderness.
Yeah, they've been talking about that for hundreds of years, and where there's smoke, there's fire,
Yeah.
and you just don't talk about this unless there's some fact behind it. And we've always talked a lot about how things that were myth is actually real, so there's a lot of credence to that, especially when it comes to a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, and the Native Americans, because they had really the first encounters with the species. It's pretty amazing, and how they respected it, how they know certain areas don't go into because this is their domain. They try to stay away from that that species as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, and we know that a creature such as like Gigantopithecus lived in China, and I mean, you look at the land bridge that used to exist, that led into North America, one that led down south towards even the Indonesian islands and Australia. This creature, or ancestors of this creature, definitely had the ability to traverse the land and expand its territory. And so I fully believe that they were able to move into North America, move into the Indonesian islands, which at the time was more of a landmass, and into even Australia.
Yeah.
We we have documented findings in those islands where you had those hobbits, those shorter ape-like people that lived there. And so I think really your size can easily be determined based on the vegetation that's available. And so, it could be that they, evolved into a smaller race because of the fact, they're matching their environment. But then we also talk about the fact that there is another type of Sasquatch known as the Yowie that lives in Australia. There's the Yowie, and then there's also the Junjidi, which are a very small. I always picture them like Ewoks, but they're a very small version of the Sasquatch. Which, if you look at the Netflix special, I forgot what it's called, but where they found those bones in the cave, those were shorter ape-like hominids that were living on that island. And so if they were that small, why wouldn't there be another species like the Junjidi that would live on, in Australia? And we talked to Yahi Dan, who is from Australia, and he does a lot of research in the Blue Mountains of Australia, which is the far east portion of the continent. Yeah, it's big enough for a continent, right? It's not an island.
Yeah.
And he's been out there a ton of times, and he had some footage where it looked like there was something that was up on the hillside staring back at him. And it looked to be one of the larger Yowies that live out there. What did you think about that footage, Daniel?
I thought it was super interesting, man. Because the video footage he produced was as if he was at the bottom of a rocky, small mountain. I mean, nothing gigantic, but it was a big hill. It was rocky, and you can see this creature kind of stand up and move, and you can tell right away it's a large bipedal individual. The conversation with Yahi Dan, that's another good one for folks that are interested in what type of equipment you want to take out into the field, some of the level of commitment that these folks are taking and risks by doing this research out in the bush, they call it in Australia.
Yeah, in the bush.
In the bush, it's pretty wild. This guy Yahi Dan, he has a ton of dedication to his passion of finding the Yowie and more evidence. We were able to go through a documentary that showed the size of the Yowie next to a group of men. And I've seen this picture posted online many times now, and people think that was a Bigfoot next to a bunch of guys researching. And really, it was a picture of a Yowie, and then they brought in the therm footage of researchers so you can get an idea of the size of it.
And the Yowie itself was captured using thermal imaging. So
yeah,
but you could see the outline of it. You could see the shape, the shoulders. When it stands up. I just there's no way you can fake that. I mean, you'd have to be like that would take so much to fake that, and not to mention like how do you fake the thermal imaging of it?
Right.
It was huge.
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, and he was able to produce pictures of the area that he filmed of the Yowie standing up, and that there was a small ridge right there, a rocky ridge, and they went up there and they measured it, and it was like 11 feet tall or something like that. I mean, it was huge.
Huge.
And with Yahi Dan, we talked a lot about the habitat out there and the environment and the type of species this might look like. We talked about like the size of a Yowie versus a Bigfoot from the Northwest. They're very different type of species, and the one down there is a little bit more of a skinnier type of a Bigfoot. Oh, see, there we go. Yeah,
there it is right there. And so what we're seeing now on the screen, if you're watching over on the YouTube side of things, is we have an image of the thermal image of Bigfoot where you could see its shoulders, or the Yowie, I should say, where you could see its shoulders, and it's standing straight up, and it's on a hillside too, so it's not an easy area to traverse, but this thing can do it. And there was two of them in this video too. There's actually two of them side by side, and it was really incredible. He also had some footage of when they were out doing research at night, where you see tree branches being pulled down and rocks being thrown at them. And, he's had a lot of encounters with the Yowie out there in Australia. And I thought it was fascinating. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, if you're going to fake that, so the footage he showed us where he was out there at night with a group of other researchers and big branches were getting pulled down and something was moving around in the bush. So here's the thing. When people say, oh, well, I bet you he was faking that. There was probably somebody in the bushes doing that to create the sound and the movement. But what you have to understand is that in the Blue Mountains, there's, poisonous snakes, poisonous spiders. It's a very treacherous area to be farting around in just to go pretend that you're a monster, I
mean, even the plants out there are gnarly.
Yeah.
You get all kinds of shit from some of these plants. It was a cool conversation because we're talking to someone that lives across the world, that is looking into this and is a dedicated researcher on this for Australia. I mean, that's just really cool to be able to talk with someone like that and you can hear the passion in him, when he's talking about everything that he's encountered, all the research they do, all the equipment that they use. I mean, this guy has the stuff. He is totally in it. So, if you're interested in the Yowie, take a listen to that interview because it was a really good interview with him, and a lot of great detail came out of that one.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And him and I exchange messages on Facebook all the time. And I'm definitely going to try and get him back on for next season because now he's back out in the bush. He sent me a video of the Blue Mountains just yesterday. So I was like, okay, he's back out there again. This is great.
He's back.
So we're definitely gonna be doing that. But one of the episodes I want to talk about, and this was probably the one we put the most into in order to get this done. I was talking with him for weeks to, kind of get him mentally prepared for this, but and then we were able to get him on. It was Mike Bler and his story with the Sasquatch that he was essentially almost face to face with when he was out hunting in Mississippi. This is probably one of the most compelling and just phenomenal stories that I have ever heard in my life. And so if there's any episode that you should listen to, I think it's the Mike Bler standoff with Sasquatch episode. This, blew the doors off.
Yeah.
And anyone who says, "Oh, Sasquatch is fake," you have to hear this story. It is incredible.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
It's I would say it's next level shit.
Yeah.
Because it is both fascinating and scary as shit when you put yourself into that environment that he was in.
Mm-hmm.
The reactions that he did during the encounter, it all makes sense. Like if you're out there and you see something and you have a rifle, well, use your scope and take a closer look at it, and he's talking about that, he's engaging with the Sasquatch. It's a mind-blowing encounter that I haven't heard one at least talk to someone that was able to tell us with the amount of detail that he did.
Yes. And to me, this wasn't at least for me, it wasn't a case where, this is somebody who's done a lot of research and was able to manufacture a story that make it sound. No, there were so many details, distinct details in the story that I can't see how or why he would make this up.
No, I don't think so either. It was just, anything that you can think of when it comes to Bigfoot, with the exception of the woo, there was no woo involved in this. This was flesh and blood. And I believe, Mike is a believer in that as well. That this creature was literally, I think it was like 100 yards away from him, maybe a little further. And then it came up close where he's still up in the tree and it's at the bottom of the tree, maybe 30 yards away from him, 20 yards away. And it's just staring at him the entire time. And he's trying to talk to it. It's just like, whoa, wow. And to hear his encounter and how he left that scene is intense on how he left it, how he's running down the hill and doing all those things. It was just amazing.
He talked about initially that he was up in his tree stand hunting, and he saw on the corner of his eye, he saw something sort of come out and sit down, and it had its back to him, and it was hairy. He could see the hair. He was saying, kind of like Motley Crue, kind of like he could see it was hair, not fur. And he couldn't tell what it was. It was sitting down. It looked to its right, and he could see the profile of its face, and he knew, like, hey, this is something else. And it was sort of fidgeting with the rocks and the dirt that was around it. And then he screamed out, "Hey!" And that's when the thing stood up. And he said this thing just shot up. Not even like a let me get some support. No, it just shot up and was standing there. And he even talked about how it looked around, like he couldn't he couldn't figure out where it came from.
Yeah, he startled it.
He startled it. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts about this story is that, like, in most cases, when people have encounters with Sasquatch, it's usually an encounter where it sees you first or it's aware of you, you know? And in this case, he saw the Sasquatch before the Sasquatch saw him. And the Sasquatch didn't know where he was at, didn't know where the sound came from, and it was sort of in a panic, probably a little frustrated, kind of like, where's this thing coming from?
Yeah.
And then finally it locked eyes with him. It saw him up in the tree stand. And that's when it just walked straight towards him and then got to a certain point where I forgot, I think it's like 30 feet, I want to say. If you listen to the episode, he'll have the exact detail, but then it just kind of stopped and just stared at him. And, at that point, that's when he was able to give descriptions where, it had his eyes were all black.
Yeah.
Here's the AI image that he says that somebody helped him make based on his description. That's it right there. I mean, that's a scary image.
Shit, yeah, it is.
But he said it looked like a man.
I mean, that looks like just a gnarly dude.
It does. I mean, if that face is looking at you, and right now we're looking at an AI rendering of the Sasquatch that Mike Bler set eyes on, or I should say locked eyes with. If I'm staring at that, I don't know if I'm like, you're an animal, you're a monster, you're a creature, I'm going to shoot you. I would think after a little while, I'm like, this is some kind of person. This is a thinking creature.
Right. I mean, look at that. That's
It's
crazy.
It's incredible. Especially if you stare at its eyes, and then you're like, wait, that's like a person. And it's hard to make that distinction. And at one point he yelled at it. He was like, "What do you want? What do you want?" He said that's when it started to growl or kind of scream at him, like, "Grah!" And he said that it was just a guttural scream that just like ripped, like the base of it, he could feel it in his chest. The story is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
He does talk about how it talked as well. It was kind of talking to itself. And it sounds just like what you hear in the Sierra sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And just
it was just a wild encounter. I mean, it's a little bit of everything that you've heard of before, plus some. Where he saw it running on all fours at one point.
Yeah.
And you hear about that too. You hear about some of them being on all fours. There's that footage that came out of Russia. I would say probably in the early 90s or late 80s, where it's a dad and his son, and they came across one out in the woods, and you see it on all fours, running and then getting on 2 feet and then doing like this, like jumping away from them. And you can see the huge length in their arms.
Oh, that's the one where it had its arms out when it jumped.
Yeah. So like, just kind of comparing that to what Bler was talking about. And, not only that story, which was the encounter of a lifetime, but, he also talked about some other interesting encounters that he's had through his years hunting and different scenarios. And with Bler, you got to take him as credible. I mean, he's ex-military, he served our country, and he's out here talking about something that really scared the shit out of him. And that's crazy.
Scared the shit out of me. I mean, when he was telling me the story, I mean, it was just so intense. And even the fact that eventually it runs off, sort of just ripping those, he said that they're mulberry bushes and throwing them in the air. He was freaking, the whole thing at this point, it's freaking out, trying to probably assert its dominance. He comes down from the tree stand and he's basically running. And then when he gets tired, he's doing a fast walk, trying to get out of that area. And he said he felt like there was something trailing him. Something was following him in the trees.
Yeah.
And that he got to a certain point and he shot off his gun. And then he took off again and eventually got to his car. And one of the things that he mentioned that it lines up with a lot of other stories you hear about the Sasquatch was that he said that when he got to his truck that he heard a scream, but this one wasn't like the one he heard before when the Sasquatch was essentially roaring towards him. He said it sounded more like a panther. Like it was like, it was a very high pitched scream.
Mhm.
And we've heard stories about Sasquatches doing that. A female Sasquatches will do that.
Mhm.
And so it could be that on his way out, the male was still back there raging, and the female was following him out to make sure that he's going to leave, or maybe she was going to attack. I don't know. And then you heard the female scream, and that's why it sounded so different from the male.
Yeah. It's the most intense interview we've ever had. And with Bluler, this was like his first interview he's done in a couple years. I think he did one prior to our podcast with him, but this is the one where he even acknowledged, he was getting back into the talk about his encounter, and it was very raw. It was very fresh. His memory was all there. It's not like it wasn't there to begin with, but like he really put a lot of energy into the conversation. Really, it was a fantastic interview with him on his encounter. The shorts that were created from that encounter were really mind-blowing. I mean, Andre did a great job on those. If you guys get a chance, check those out, man. Those are awesome.
And that was a hard one too, because the story was so long. It was like 7 parts.
Yeah, it could have been 10,
Yeah, it could have been more, but I was like, okay, I got to cut it back a little bit. But no, it was absolutely mind-blowing. He even talks about the effect it had on him afterwards.
Yeah.
And some of the things that he was telling us that he did afterwards, I mean, the trauma that it caused him, and it's not something that you want to lie about.
No.
This was, I always say, I feel like Mike Bler, he is, in my opinion, he's the Bob Lazar of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
He had the encounter that it changes everything.
Yeah, it's the most. I mean, it could have easily been a freaking a movie or something. And not that it was like theatrical, but just the intensity of it, just the intensity of the encounter. I mean, you guys got to check that one out. I mean, I'm telling you right now, just listen to that. It is mind-blowing action. It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Man, that was to me, that was the highlight of the season. Ron Morehead was really another big highlight, but getting Mike Bler, a guy we tried really hard to get on and tell his story, it was dude, it was fucking intense, dude. Definitely check out that episode. It was really good.
Just circling back to Ron, we actually also touched on the famous Bigfoot 911 call.
That's right, you did.
We did talk about that, and he talked about that whole situation and how they wanted to dig up his dog that got thrown over the fence, and how the owner wouldn't let them do that. So he goes into detail about that famous 911 call, which a lot of shows or podcasts that are out there use them as part of their intro. I mean, if you ever hear that and you want to know more about that, listen to that interview, because it really it gives you some of those details that you're like, oh shit, no way, I didn't know that. So just check that out. Check that out. It's really good.
Because he was like, I'm the one who recorded that.
Yep. He's the one that he's the one that got it from the dispatch that was out there, and he interviewed the actual guy who called it in.
Yeah.
So he did a lot of that kind of research back in those days, where he doesn't do it as much now. But it's just really, really cool stuff.
Dude, it was awesome stuff, dude. Another episode that I want to talk about was, and there's someone, we had a lot of episodes. Obviously, we had 11 different episodes. I don't know if we're going to be able to cover everyone in this episode, but one of the ones I wanted to talk about was the monster of Bean Hollow. That was actually told by a family friend of mine. His name is Sergio Ramirez, and he tells a story about an encounter with Sasquatch that happened in the pitch black darkness. The only light they had was the light from the moon. Now, that was the only part that I thought was nuts, is that they went out there with no flashlights. That they just went out there with just the light of the moon. They went out to this area that is now private property. It's, somebody owns that land now. But there's two lakes. One is called Bean Hollow Lake, and the other one it has a funny name to it. It's Los Frijoles Reservoir.
Something like that. Yeah, that's a good memory. Yeah, I forgot.
I remember, I thought it was so weird. I was like, what's a weird name? And they were looking at a map, and they said, hey, you want to go check it out? And it's probably good fishing there. And this was close to midnight. It was on New Year's Eve. And they're like, yeah, let's go. And they drove out there in the pitch black darkness because they were young and just like stupid. And they were just like, why not? And they're walking down this path. And he said it was more of a maintenance path. They could tell that like the county had made it, and dirt path. And they're walking down the path, talking, bullshitting with each other. And then all of a sudden they just stopped in their tracks because there was a white shed that was there, probably put there by the county. Maybe it has pumps in it. Maybe it has tools. Who knows? And they said they stopped dead in their tracks because they saw the silhouette of a Sasquatch, of a tall, broad being staring back at them. And they just froze because at that point, when you see the outline of a being staring at you, that's going to make you stop and go, well, what the hell is that?
Well, especially when you're out there at night and you don't expect to see anything. You're not prepared for anything, and you come across something of this nature, a bipedal, extremely large, tall creature that is standing by a shed, walks across the road up on the hillside, and basically walks them out of there.
Yeah.
That was a pretty crazy encounter, because it's something that it's one of those things where you weren't planning for it. You weren't out there looking for anything, and you came across it. And the idea that they went back the next day was even more insane.
Yeah. But like the encounter itself, it walked across the path, and that's when he really got an idea of how big this fucker really was. And he just said how it walked across the path, and he's like, oh my God, it's huge. And it walked through these manzanita bushes that were nearby. And I was trying to focus my camera there. These manzanita bushes, and it moved up into the hills above him. So it had like an advantage over them. And he said it moved through the brush like it was nothing. And if that was a person, like a human, they would have had a tough time trying to walk through that tough terrain. This thing just mowed right through it. Like,
yeah,
because it's bigger, and that was terrifying to think about running into that.
And the idea of going back the next day and finding a structure out there that had an intense odor around it, really kind of sealed it up, and I believe this happened back in 1989. If my memory serves me correctly.
Late 80s, definitely.
Late 80s. He was saying 89, and
I think it was 89.
And it really ties into, coincidentally, episode, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's the Sasquatch Chronicle episode where Claire, the lady from from the UK talked about her encounter on the coastline and over by Monterey, and this is the area where he was at when he saw one.
Yeah, he was in Sergio was in the Santa Cruz area, just
Mhm.
north of Santa Cruz, and then hers was in I thought it was in Carmel, but it was along the California coastline. And I think what this shows you is that when you look at these two stories and how close they are in date and in year, I think it goes to show you that there were Sasquatches that lived near the coastline. Probably not anymore, but they were there.
Yeah, they were there. And I got a chance when I was talking to Ron Morehead. I brought up this encounter that Sergio had, and I tied it into the Claire encounter that a lot of people have heard. And Ron was able to talk about that because he actually has interviewed Claire.
Yeah, he has.
He has talked to her, and he was able to talk about that a little bit about what she said and the encounter and how credible it is. So it just goes to show you that these encounters happen. They if you're lucky, it happens around the same time, and this one happened around the same time. So it's just really cool. It's cool
really
to tie it together. Cool to tie it together like that.
Yeah,
makes sense.
They fled from that scene terrified, which of course I'd be terrified too. I'd be running as fast as I can.
Oh shit, yeah.
They drove away and they stopped at I think it was a gas station a ways, down the road from where that was at, down the highway, and they made the decision, hey, look, that couldn't have been anything else but a Sasquatch. And so they decided to stay the night right there in the parking lot because they were so freaked out. The next day they went back there, and I know you touched on this already, but they went back there. They said they found, kind of like, the trees were kind of pushed away, almost like little nests, and it was underneath another bush, and it smelled really bad. And those descriptions match so many other stories that we've heard about these nest sites that the Sasquatches will live in. And these are also the same kind of things that Yahi Dan and his group have found in Australia, where they found multiple nests that were kind of laid out in in an area where you can tell they had been living in for a little while. And that, I think, is just fascinating because who knows? I mean, for all we know, they're still living in those nests. They hear them coming and they just take off.
Yeah, they seem very curious. Everyone that we've talked to gave me a sense that this species is very curious, very secluded, doesn't necessarily like encounters, and they're not afraid to let themselves be known to people. Essentially, if you see one, they probably already saw you, most likely. And they're very vocal. They do a lot of the common things that you hear: rock throwing, sounds. Some of them have the odor and some don't. With Sergio's encounter, when him and his friend went back to the site, they smelled a bad odor around this nest. And just speaking of nests, I mean, there's different descriptions of a Sasquatch nest. One is more of a gorilla type of nesting site where you have big leaves laid out, where something comfortable to sleep on, I should say, with no roof. Where Sergio's, you actually crawled in there and there's a roof above it of sticks and branches and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to hear different descriptions of what might possibly be a sleeping area of where something like this slept. It's just it's just really fascinating to kind of just hear different encounters and what they saw and try to piece it together with what you're hearing from other people.
Yeah, I mean the tree structures, the nest structures, it's all very similar, and it's all in different parts of the world. We're talking about obviously Australia, we're talking about Russia, China, uh, the United States, pretty much all over, in the South and then the Pacific Northwest, even on the East Coast. I mean, these things are everywhere.
Well, even in the Amazon, they got a video of a dead ape that they killed, and it's like a 5 foot tall ape, maybe a little
Yeah.
taller than that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there that that humans that live in those areas know about, that us people that are so used to technology and stuff have never encountered something like this. So we just hear stories about it. It's wild, man. It's
Well, I think I told the story. I forget what episode it was, but about those German I think they were German or they were French soldiers that were flying in a helicopter through Africa, and they saw this gigantic snake that was, I forgot how big it was, but it was ginormous.
Yeah.
And no one's ever seen one that big ever before and ever again. So it's like there are things out there that exist, especially I would imagine in deep ocean where we can't travel that often. And there are creatures that we just are extremely unknown because we can't get there. Just like in Australia in the Blue Mountains, it's so dense and so treacherous, you just can't get in there. And there are areas in the United States in the deep wilderness that people just can't really get to that often, that are areas in which they live in because nobody bothers them there.
Yeah. The rule of thumb on Bigfoot, there's one Sasquatch for every 1,000 black bear. Mm-hmm. So you kind of keep that in mind as you're researching more about this species and the population of it, where we're not, I from what I've, talked to and listened, and it's not like there's populations of like 10,000 of them in one area. These creatures, these species run in small groups, in family units essentially. And even Ron spoke about that, where you have an alpha, and then you have a male alpha and an alpha female, and then you have some juveniles, and I haven't heard anyone talk about, like, do they stay with them for life or what have you. There's a lot of species out there that will have multiple females with them, so again, those are the kind of things that a lot of people like us don't really know, but the more and more we talk to people about, Sasquatch, the more you find out, and the more you find out, the more your mind opens up, and you're just like, this thing there has to be some credence to all of this. There has to be something there for people to keep on having these encounters, and it's there has to be something there. I don't see why there wouldn't be at this point.
Mm-hmm. I agree. No, there's so much behind it that it's hard to say that, like everyone is just making this up or everyone is just seeing black bears or grizzly bears. No, I mean, there's so much detail out there that it just goes to show you that this creature lives out there. And I think at the same time, I almost feel like it's a creature that people don't want to find, because if you do, how do you document it? What do you do? I think it's just terrifying in itself, knowing that there's a bipedal hominid out there that can think on its own and can react emotionally and, decisively on what it wants to do and how it's going to hide and how it's going to, deal with the situation at hand. And I don't know if that's something that mainstream academia wants to go out and find. And there's also, of course, there's conspiracy theories about why they don't want it found, all that, the logging industry, all that.
Right.
That would definitely rock a lot. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's become more of an urban legend than it has been like that. That there's a certain type of bear living out there. I think eventually this thing will get found. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, because you really need a specimen to justify everything, and once you have that specimen, and for all we know, maybe there already is one out there and the public doesn't know about it, right? There's videos out there where you see a military helicopter carrying a huge body out of the woods, hanging from this large rope, kind of like the stuff that rescue choppers use to pick people up off of mountains, stuff like that, where you see them carrying what looks like a big hairy freaking Bigfoot, and you don't know what that is, and it's you don't know if they already have one. I mean, there's stories of the U.S. government working with Bigfoot during the big volcano that erupted, Mount St. Helen. There are stories of the government, working and trying to rescue some of these darn things. So it's just, you don't know if it's really there or not, and it's going to take someone that go out there and come across one. Maybe it's already dead, who knows? But videos nowadays are great because the clarity is really good. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, everything's always fuzzy whenever it comes to Bigfoot." Well, yeah, because when you're out there, you're not expected to see something like this, and grabbing your camera or your phone is almost like the last thing you want to do. Is just you just want to get out. So it makes sense where sometimes it's not clear and straightforward, and a lot of times the videos and the conversations that we've been having with people is that these things blend in so freaking well into the background where you really don't know what it is unless it moves. It has such incredible camouflage that it just blends into the shadows. It is so incredible. But I would love to see one if there was ever one captured, or found, or what have you, or a definite 4K video of one walking up to a camera and looking at it, and something like that. That is proof. 100% proof. I really think that it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen at some point. And the more people that are out there looking for it, the more technology that is being used to find it, and the stuff that people are finding and videoing now with all this technology that we have, it's really starting to crack open that nutshell of where is Sasquatch? What is Sasquatch? Is Sasquatch real? And with the technology that we have, it's just a matter of time before it's found.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's going to do it for episode 12 of Beyond the Unknown. Obviously, there were some more episodes that we'd love to talk about. Our episode with director Darcy Weir is another great episode. You should definitely check that one out.
That's a good one.
Another episode that's called The Kentucky Mountain Monsters, featuring Michael, who had an encounter with his, at the time, girlfriend and one of his good friends, where they were surrounded by a number of Sasquatches. His story is also featured on These Woods Are Haunted, so definitely check that out. And Amanda, the Bigfoot lady, she had some really cool stories about her two encounters that go into a lot of the lore of Bigfoot. And then also we have Brandon, who was on from Tinfoil Tales podcast, who had an incredible story about his encounter with, all I can really describe it as, was a dog man. Yeah. And this thing was huge. It was black. It was menacing. So definitely check that out. And check out his podcast as well, Tinfoil Tales. Check out Matt Napp's podcast, Bigfoot Crossroads. Check out Bigfoot Club podcast.
And even Yahi Dan has his own podcast too.
Yeah.
You can check his out. Just type it in, Yahi Dan. He'll pop up. And
guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back really, really soon with the beginning of season 3. Yeah. But I wanted to have this episode where we kind of talked about the stories that that we heard here on season 2, and let you know that yes, we're gonna be back for a season 3 really soon. And I'm starting to line up guests right now, and so we're really looking forward to getting back on the grind and hearing some more of these fascinating, just incredible encounters.
Yeah, stay
from
tuned,
people
everybody.
just like you. Yeah, stay
tuned. More information coming your way. Here we go.
All right, you guys, we will catch you guys next time. Until then, if you want to support the channel, head on over to nicotina.net and click on Beyond the Unknown, and there are memberships available. And that way, it'll help you support the channel. It'll also give you access to the community where both Daniel and myself post different videos, stories, anything we come across on social media, anything we come across that we feel is relevant to our research into Sasquatch or UFOs. We're going to put it on there, so that gives you access to that. Definitely a cool way to help support the channel and the podcast. And wherever you find podcasts, maybe Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, Pocket Cast, wherever you find your podcast, you will find Beyond the Unknown. Make sure you follow us on whatever platform you use to follow to listen to podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review and a positive comment as well. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have a story that you want to share with us, you can email us at beyondxunknown@gmail.com. And we'd love to have you on here to tell your story or your encounter with anything that's Sasquatch, cryptid, UFO, paranormal. Let us know, reach out to us, and we'd love to hear your story. And with that being said, we'll see you guys next time.